seems that some people are now reluctant to even report crime in this country. So how do we even begin to tackle it? Let's speak to Chet Thomas, who's the CEO of IRS Forensic Investigations. Chet, thanks very much for your time. We know, as a matter of fact, I mean, we get statistics quarterly in our country, but we know that crime is seriously underreported.
It is. If one looks at one of the more horrendous crimes that plague South Africa, which is rape, a study at WITS a few years ago showed that only 1 in 9 rapes are reported. Compounded with that out of those 1 in 9, there's only a 5% conviction rate, shows why people are so reluctant to report these heinous crimes.
We've seen various political parties making all sorts of promises. Are there any particular policies? I mean, everyone looks for a silver bullet to deal with crime. We've seen some countries, the United States, has brought down violent crime in places like New York, for example. Are there particular policies that our government could actually implement to follow that would reduce crime?
You make a very valid point by saying there isn't a silver bullet. But when one looks at countries with similar crimes to South Africa, like Mexico, for example, they've been able to actually reduce the rate of violent crime, kidnapping, murder in the last 2 years or so. So there are policies and procedures that can be followed. It means that there has to be buy-in from a number of departments as well as the people at large. Crime in South Africa is acceptable to a certain extent. We've all seen images of trucks that have crashed and how people will start looting those trucks. We now see that crime has become much more a societal problem than it is just a criminal problem, because opportunistic people are taking advantage, which would never have taken advantage of a situation like that previously.
That's what happened in July 2021, of course.
So the July 2021 unrest is playing on everybody's mind, especially now that we're going into this election cycle. But this isn't so dissimilar to 30 years ago, where we had a lot of violence leading up to the 1994 elections. One must remember, just a month before the 1994 election, we had the IFP march on downtown Johannesburg. It started at Library Gardens, it ended up at Shell House, and it was a massive massacre of sorts. We saw a lot of violence on the trains, we saw East Rand violence in Tokoza, Katlong, Vosloorus, and a year prior to that, of course, we'd seen what happened in Boipatong. So leading up to this election, we've got the same feelings. We've got people who are very enthusiastic, they're very excited that perhaps they can bring about change, but then at the same time people are very scared because they saw what happened in July 2021. But I do think that our authorities are on top of this and have put in place stringent policies to try and prevent July 2021 from happening again.
One of the most staggering numbers that I've been quoting so often in the last year is that only around 12% of the murders in South Africa end in a conviction. And I just put that in context. I read over the weekend that I think in the United States, around 50% of murders result in a conviction. So, you know, we don't live in a TV fantasy land where every murder is solved anywhere in the world. What I'm trying to get to is that that would clearly show that there are problems within the police, around detectives, around how to detect crimes, how to solve them, resources, and then also leadership. And so many people point to leadership in the police. Are those things that over, say, 10 years could be improved that would eventually result in the reduction of violent crime?
It would definitely need 5 to 10 years. The major issue we have, look, we're talking about almost 9 in every 10 murderers walking free in South Africa. That's a horrendous statistic. What it means, in essence, is that we don't have correct detection skills. And what we mean by that is, despite the minister always bragging about more boots on the ground, that doesn't equate to more detectives. He also doesn't talk about the natural attrition that's taking place within the police service. You've got people who are retiring, people who are going to the private sector. So when new boots come on the ground, there's nobody replacing the detectives. We have a critical skills deficit within the detective service of SAPS. We're short just over 8,000 qualified detectives, and the same within the Hawks. The Hawks, we are only 50% capacitated, but of that, only 1,500 of the Hawks members are actually operational. So without the detective skills, without those investigation techniques, we're not going to see convictions, we're not going to get crime off the street.
Well, interesting. I'm speaking of the minister. I mean, last month, he told us that there were about 3,700 murderers, extortionists, and the like, who had been exposed through the work of crime intelligence in particular. So he was waxing lyrical about the good work that they have done. But this is, of course, the same crime intelligence that we know over decades now has had serious problems. I mean, leadership problems, crime also infested with the criminals.
Look, the statistics are strange because we hear about Operation Chanela over the last year making 600,000 arrests. Now, our prisons are sitting at about 140% capacity. Where are all these people? You make these arrests, but who investigates the crimes that they purportedly committed? Who then prosecutes them? We don't have enough prosecutors. We don't have enough courtrooms. We don't have enough court days. We don't have enough presiding officers. So it's a situation at the moment that is in favor of the criminal. And there's a lot of changes that need to take place. But crime intelligence seems to have gone through a bit of a reboot. We've seen they've created specialized units in respect of cash in transit, kidnapping task teams, etc. And these intelligence-led investigations have delivered results. But any intelligence-led investigation ultimately becomes a prosecutorial-guided investigation because they now need to take those arrests, take that intelligence, turn it into evidence, prosecute the perpetrators. And this is where we're falling short. We're falling short simply because we don't have enough detectives and we haven't had that skills transfer from the existing detectives who are now leaving in droves. Some are taking early retirement. Some are just literally, as the minister likes to say, gatvol.
Many parties argue that we need longer prison sentences. Some talk about capital punishment. Would changing punishment change anything without improving the detection rate?
No. No. We've got prisons that are filled beyond capacity. We don't have enough courtrooms to try these. We need to start looking at alternatives. And like I mentioned at the outset, there's societal changes that need to happen because people are becoming criminals purely through opportunity and because of the fact that our economy is in such dire straits that our unemployment rate is at an all-time high.
But how do other jurisdictions similar to us handle the issue of resources, capacity constraints, budgetary issues, but are more successful compared to us?
So per capita, we don't have enough police officers in South Africa. We're sitting between 60 and 70 million as a population, and we've got about 180,000 police officers. So we don't have enough police officers. What we do have more than enough of is security officers. It's one of the biggest industries in South Africa, and we make up one of the biggest security industries in the world. And the police have become very open of late. Commissioner Mtombela from Gauteng and Commissioner Mkhwanazi from KwaZulu-Natal have spoken about the role that the private security industry is playing. They've spoken openly about the E2 project, which is a memorandum of understanding between Business Against Crime South Africa and the South African Police Services that allows for security officers to assist the police and act as force multipliers. And we saw this come into play during July 2021. The security supported and backed up the police in a significant manner. So from a policing resource perspective, there are people there. We also have a huge legal fraternity and accounting fraternity that should be able to lend their expertise to assist in the investigation of crimes, not just from a proactive perspective, but more importantly from a reactive detection perspective.
Chad Thomas, thank you very much indeed. CEO at IRS Forensic Investigations. Really appreciate you coming into Ballot Brief tonight.